Has the art that has moved you the most been made by Christians or non-Christians? And we're talking art, music, visual, drama, literature. So what comes, and you can turn this off, please. What comes in all shapes and sizes, genders and generations, wears multiple hats, and can be likened to a friend, a parent, an uncle, a coach, a scoutmaster, or a counselor. Beginning with the ancient Greeks, mentoring is one of the oldest forms of influence, because mentor was the name of a man. He was the trusted advisor and the counsel of Odysseus. And a mentor was not a formal teacher to Odysseus. He was his advisor. He was someone who went beyond teaching. And mentoring occurs when one individual actively builds into another individual by sharing his knowledge, experience, wisdom, and heart. What do all mentors have in common? Is it really important for the independent-minded artist to seek mentoring relationships? How will you benefit? 2 Timothy 2, 1 through 3. You then, my child, be strengthened by the grace that's in Christ Jesus. And what you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to faithful men, who will be able to teach others also. Paul, Timothy, faithful men, others. Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, the ends of the earth. It's not a lesson about geography, it's a lesson about process, about multiplication. Put Paul, Timothy, faithful men, Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, the ends of the earth, put them together. That's how it happens. Through relationships, and it keeps on going. Proverbs 27:17. Iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. Titus 2:3 through 4. Older women likewise are to be reverent in their behavior, not malicious gossips, nor enslaved to much wine, teaching what is good so that they may encourage the young women to love their husbands, love their children, etc. Mentoring. Give instruction to a wise man, wrote Solomon in Proverbs 9:9, and he will still be wiser. Teach a righteous man, and he will increase his learning. And then Paul wrote to the church in Philippi, the things you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. There's nothing more biblical than mentoring. In Christian circles, we've called it discipleship. But mentoring is even greater than discipleship because it involves all areas of life. It's not just about the spiritual areas and the Christian areas. It involves areas of how we work with our hands, how we learn music, how we learn art, how we learn business, how we learn how to handle our money and to make decisions about life. Mentoring touches all areas of life. Now, there's many historical examples, and you can begin all the way in the Old Testament with Moses and Joshua. And Moses influenced Joshua, who took his place, and Moses couldn't enter the promised land, but Joshua did. He was a different kind of leader, but nevertheless, he was influenced by the older one, Elijah and Elisha. They both were prophets, and they both exercised their gifts differently, but the older one gave his mantle. It's like the baton in a race to the younger one. And then Ruth and Naomi, the older, wiser woman, mentoring, building her life into actually her daughter-in-law, Naomi. And then, of course, in ancient Greece, there was Aristotle, who mentored Alexander. And then when the Apostle Paul came to Christ, and his name was previously Saul, there was a man named Ananias who took him under his wing. And against anybody else's advice, and no one else trusted the process, Saul was mentored by Ananias. And then, of course, we see that in 2 Timothy, there's Paul and Timothy. And then, have you ever heard of Billy Graham? Have you ever heard of Mordecai Ham? That was his Sunday school teacher. Mordecai Ham was a mentor to Billy Graham. I bet you there's some rewards in glory for Mordecai Ham. Now, what is mentoring? One of the speakers here, and Natalie, in my briefcase is a book by Bob Beal. If you would just hand it to me, please. One of the speakers here is Bob Beal, who is a mentor's mentor. He is an executive coach of the highest order. And he has influenced my life as he has hundreds of others. And he's written a book called Mentoring: Confidence in Finding a Mentor and Becoming One. Have any of you sat under his teaching or learned from Bob Beal? Unbelievably good. He's in another room right now. He's here every year. And every sentence is golden from Bob Beal. Mentoring is a lifelong relationship in which a mentor helps a protege reach her or his God-given potential. And he focuses on the relationship and it being lifelong. But it doesn't mean the mentoring relationships are all the same. And it doesn't mean that it involves all of your life and takes all of your time. But it's a relationship that transcends simply the present. Or Bobby Clinton, who's a well-known professor at Fuller Seminary and a researcher in leadership models, and has an engineering sort of a mind, not so touchy-feely. But he has a definition of mentoring that's more technical. Mentoring is a relational experience in which one person, the mentor, empowers another person, the mentoree, by a transfer of resources. That's kind of the technical term. Would you mentor me? I'd like you to transfer your resources to me. What does that mean? Well, we're going to talk about that a little bit. Or, here at the Leadership Forum, if you've read the materials, you've learned that mentoring is one of the values that is offered, that is valued by the leadership here, and opportunities for mentoring are offered to everyone who comes. And the definition here is mentoring is an intentional but flexible relationship of trust in which one person, the mentor, enables another, the mentee, to develop their potential and gifting for the service of God's kingdom. It's a definition of the European Leadership Forum. Now, I was reading, today's most most common resource for information? Google. I plugged in mentoring on Google, and boy, you can read a million things about mentoring. I read something interesting. I don't know who Julie Winkle Giuliani is, but she wrote this. Today, the lines between mentoring and networking are blurring. Welcome to the world of mentworking. And that struck a chord in me. Because one of the things that happens at events like this or any conference, and I've known this for 25 years, when you go to an event, what happens in the room when you sit and listen is one thing, and it's very important. But what happens in the corridor during the coffee, or in the lunch, or after everything's over, or when you skip a session and you hang out with somebody, that's the networking, and that's what can change the life. And so mentworking, I like that a lot. Now, Bobby Clinton, he has a book where he develops 9 mentoring models. And when I understood this, it freed me from being forced into the box of somebody else's definition. You see, I'm a very creative, spontaneous sort of person. I've always been that way. I'm an artist first, in terms of how I'm wired. And yet I also went to Dallas Theological Seminary, which is designed for obsessive compulsive engineering types. Just everything's like this, and all the precise definitions, and if you think like us, if you don't, then boy, you're gonna see Red Evans, who's the dean. And so it's just, freedom was not so much encouraged there. And so the definitions of discipleship and mentoring were very narrow. And this is what Campus Crusade is. This is how you disciple. This is what the navigators say. That's all very good if you're wired that way. But if you're not wired that way, how can you do it? 9 mentoring models from Bobby Clinton. A discipler, helping with the basic habits of the Christian life. And that stuff has been developed by Campus Crusade and the Navigators and other parachurch organizations. I'm going to say probably also the International Student Christian, all sorts of names, ICFA, IFCA, NBA, the student movement. Or some would say a mentor is a spiritual guide, evaluation and help with spiritual depth and maturity. Someone who's really thinking deep about this, and they actually come and they evaluate, and you go deep. Or a coach, someone who is going to help you improve your skills. If you're a basketball player, someone to help you with your dribble, or your skyhook, or your passing game. Or a counselor is important, someone who will give wise advice related to the needs or the problems, or a decision that needs to be made. Or maybe a mentor is someone who's primarily going to transfer knowledge, like a teacher. Knowledge that you need that someone else has, and you're going to take the initiative to get that knowledge. Or perhaps a mentor is a sponsor, someone who is providing guidance and linking someone to key people and to potential resources. Have you ever met somebody like this? You're talking about them and he just says, oh, I know somebody who can help you. Or I know, maybe she can do this. Or have you thought about this book? Or have you just this idea generator of someone who can help? That's kind of a sponsor. It's a fascinating way to mentor. It's a fascinating way to help. Or the contemporary model that Clinton talks about. And this is not personal mentoring at all. This is learning the values and inspiration from the example of others in our society, people we don't know, but we admire, and we learn from them from afar. And perhaps we read their readings, we read their writings, or we read their poetry. We watch all of their movies. If they're speakers, we listen to everything that they're saying. When I was young, Francis Schaeffer was that man for me. I read every book I could get my hands on. I'd never met him personally. I saw him speak, but I read everything, and I just wanted to think like Francis Schaeffer. He was a contemporary model mentor for me, and he had no idea who I was. Or maybe there's a historical model. Values and inspiration learned from the lives of those who have gone before us. Again, often derived from reading. Who are the people in history that you've read about that, that person was inspiring, or this person, or the other? And there are great people in history that have inspired us to make certain decisions and go in certain directions and shaped our values. Now, how do we find a mentor? Now, one thing I've learned when I'm speaking is that sometimes my messages get dry. That's when I need water. And because when you don't have anything moist in your mouth, you start so it's great. Thank you, Natalie. How do we find a mentor? I think that's really important. I'm going to talk to you about that. The potential benefits of being a protege. I don't like the word mentee. It's just kind of like, protege. Oh, that's a little bit French. Have a rendezvous with your protege. And if you're a protege and you find a mentor, your worldview may be revolutionized. You don't know, but it sure might be. Your values may be influenced and strengthened. The direction in your life may become surer, more stable. Your reasons for pursuing that direction may become clearer. And it's so important when you're making major decisions that you have wise counsel, so that when you are in the middle of crisis with that which you were deciding about, you're not dropping out because you were sure of the wisdom of what you were doing and of the direction of the Lord. Your major life decisions can be affirmed by mentors. And you can receive wisdom and help with the most demanding problems. And you can be trained to serve as a mentor for others, and so fulfill 2 Timothy 2:1-3. The ideal mentor. Now, this is from Bob Beal's book, Mentoring. So, if you are looking for a mentor, which I believe, if you want a mentor, you should take the initiative. Don't wait for one to come to you. The hungry person should actually go to the table, go to the buffet line, not wait for someone to come and serve. But if you're looking for a mentor, ask some key questions. 1, will he be honest with you? Don't just look for someone who will agree with you with everything. Is he a model for you? Will she be committed to you? Is she open and transparent, or does she just know all the answers? Does he have important things to teach you? Does he believe in your potential? Will she help you define your dream and plan to turn your dream into reality. In other words, is that relationship going to benefit you, or is it a platform for that person to just focus on the things that has made him successful? Is he successful in your eyes? Is he open to learning from you as well as teaching you? And is he willing to stay on your agenda, not just his? Again, I'm quoting from Beale. What you're really looking for is a person that you know cares for you, believes in you, and encourages you. A good mentor is a person that you naturally enjoy being with, that has more experience than you have, that would be happy to help you win in life, to help you grow in sensitive areas most other friends simply put up with on a day-to-day basis. If you found this person, you found a mentor. Now, if you are a protege in a mentoring relationship, there are keys to growth. The first one is the realization that this is not just an arrangement and an appointment. This is a relationship. And the second is, and I probably believe this is the most important, in a mentoring protege relationship, the responsibility to initiate is in the court of the protege. Don't wait for the mentor to initiate. The hungry one goes to the table. Initiate, initiate, initiate. And this is so difficult for some people who are more bashful or feel like, oh, he's so important. I don't want to interrupt. Excuse me, I know you're too busy right now, but... And then we apologize for 5 different things before we actually engage in the conversation that we've already agreed to do in the mentoring and protege relationship. Initiate. The third, ask a million questions. The protege who asks questions will get answers. When you're dealing with significant issues and problems, if you find the right question, the solutions often rise to the surface. Not because you discussed the options, but because you've identified the right questions. Make it as convenient as possible for your mentor to help you. Said, oh, I can come to you. When's a good time for me to call? When can we Skype? I'll adjust my schedule. Oh, okay, we're 10 hours different? Okay, I'll get up in the middle of the night to Skype. Instead of, oh, Mr. Mentor, would you get up at 2 in the morning so you can Skype with me? You know, well, and obviously, Mr. Mentor might do that. You know, I would do it, and I have done it. But as a protege, I think it's very good that we take such initiatives there and express appreciation. Now, what if you're a mentor? I think some of us are both, by the way. There are some of us who have a few kilometers under our feet. We've been running this race for years and years and years. And some of us are proteges, and some of us are both. I'll just say to you now, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, I'm both. And for 45 years, I've had mentors, and I have one today. I'll tell you about him later. And I call these people the fathers of my life. And I'll get back to that later. But I also have people whose lives I build into. Now, if you're a mentor, your ideal protege, because people are coming to you and they said, will you please mentor me? Perhaps they are. Do you like her? Do you like him? If you're kind of bothered by this person, boy, that person's kind of weird. I don't want to spend. Well, it's important that you need to have some basic chemistry with a person. Does he respect you? Do you welcome a friendship with him? Do you believe in him? Is he hungry and self-motivated? These are things, again, that we as mentors are kind of asking ourselves when we're considering to have a relationship with a protege. And is he grateful? Is he going to take for granted what I'm offering? Or is he going to really try to use it? Now, there's some keys to success as a mentor, and I'd like to share with you some general principles, and then we're going to look at principles specifically for artists. Make time for your protege. If you agree to have the relationship, put it in your schedule. And ask your protege profound questions. Now, Bob Beal considers his relationship with mine to be a mentoring relationship. When we communicate, which is not all that often, he says, "Dear Chuck, how is my lifelong friend?" He greets the relationship that way. It's so interesting. And then when we meet or we're on the phone, which is not very often, he asks some very specific questions that I've benefited from. What are your priorities? It's not that he doesn't have any thoughts about what I should do to get my life more in order. What are your priorities? Charles, how can I help you today? And then my favorite question, I remember once, I took him to lunch in Phoenix. I went to visit him in Arizona. I took him to lunch, and we sat down over a salad bar. I wanted him to think that I don't always eat too much. And so we sat down at a salad bar, and he said, "Okay, if I can help you with one thing today, what would that be?" Focus. He focused. And it got me to think. And I remember going through this list in my mind and then choosing one thing. And then we talked about it for the next hour. He was very helpful, but it's interesting, his mentality was that of, this is a lifelong relationship, but we're not going to talk about everything under the sun. We're going to focus, and we're going to have a conversation that's going to be meaningful. Listen to your protege. Welcome debate. If your protege disagrees, welcome the debate. Don't get defensive. Encourage your protege. And then be open. And pray for your protege. Love your protege. Now, what about for artists? Mentoring for artists. That's what we are. If we're mentoring artists, we should understand the artist's passion for art. Especially, we should study and appreciate the specific form of art that the artist has given his or her life to. Now, I understand music, piano, something about painting, etc. I know something about other forms of art. I know very little about filmmaking. I know very little bit about producing musicals. I know very little bit about poetry. I've learned some as I've gotten to know Natalie these last couple of years. She's a poet, and she shared with me some of her knowledge of poetry, and it's helped me a lot. So we learn about things, but we learn the form and we study the form of art of the person in whose life we're building into. And I believe when we mentor an artist, one of the things we can do together is create art together. That's a beautiful thing to do, and I've done that. Now, my mentor today is Johan Kondelin. He's from Finland. He's about 8 years older than me, and he is very impressive in many, many, many ways. But he is a Lutheran priest, but he was also the chaplain of the Finnish Parliament for 25 years. And he has run an organization that works with former prime ministers and presidents to work behind the scenes at peacemaking all around the world, staving off potential major conflicts before they turn into disaster. And you don't know about it because when he's successful, it doesn't hit the news. But the biggest thing that hit the news that Johan was involved with was the peace accords in, was it Colombia? Oh my goodness. In Central America, where they just signed this major peace agreement. This 20-year rebel group, this communist rebel group. Why am I not remembering the name? Okay, but hundreds of thousands were killed. Peace has now come to that area, and he's worked with pastor and missionaries there, and one got a Nobel Prize for it. So Johan's one of my mentors. He's my current mentor now. He also paints. So when I go to Finland once a year, in the afternoons we sit and we paint. He's a good painter, and I like to make a mess. And we just have a good time talking and painting together as well. Help the artist structure his life. Most artists need help with that. Help the artist plan his career. Some artists really need help with that, especially if they're going to be doing this professionally. And help the artist to try to understand how can one be a professional artist or even a professional, let's say classical musician, as David was talking about. And some classical musicians that I know are really great in their classical music, and they struggle in understanding how is that a platform for their faith. It's not an easy question for them to deal with. And are they on the right career path, etc. These are questions there. Open doors for the artists that you work with. Celebrate his growth and success together, and then pray with them. Now, I told you that my mentors over the years, I call them the fathers of my life, and apart from my granny, really, they've all been men. And phenomenal people who some of them didn't know they were building into my life in such a profound way, and some of them have known that. But I want you to take your pen and a paper and think back for a minute and automatically write who are the most important men or women in the history of your life that could be defined as a mentor in any one of these categories. In other words, who are the fathers and mothers of your life? Automatic writing. Write fast. The name comes to mind, write it down. Boom, boom, boom. Write it down. Now, I'm going to ask you two more questions. Is there anyone that you feel the Lord would have you mentor? Is there anyone that you believe the Lord would want you to mentor? Secondly, is there anyone that you believe you want to ask to be your mentor? Take a moment, and if names come to mind, write them down. First question, is there anyone you would like to mentor? I'm not going to ask you to tell those names. This is private. And is there anyone you would like to ask to be your mentor? Dear Lord, you have designed human relationships to build into one another. And of course, the condition of sin and selfishness and self-sufficiency and insecurity keeps us from asking for counsel and seeking for wise mentoring relationships. And sometimes we're so busy that we don't understand the importance of building into the lives of others personally. And so, Lord, I pray for each man and woman in this room right now. Would you help each one answer the question, is there anyone, Lord, that you want me to mentor? And Lord, do you want me to ask someone to be my mentor? Speak to us. In Jesus' name, amen.